Welcome back to Strength Coach Tutorials, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this sliding scale athlete monitoring visualization. So how this scale works is I'm going to be able to select from my athletes as well as the date they entered their values, and the scale is going to automatically update to represent those values. This is going to be a really powerful tool for anyone who is making reports, so let's get after it. Okay, so we're back, and the first thing that we're going to need to do is just create our selector cells for our athlete and our date. To give you an idea of what I've already set up, I have a data table here that has some athlete names in it and then some date values. And then all I've done is use unique function, which is available in, I believe, Excel 365. It just creates a spilled array that I've used on the table date column, and it pulls out all of the unique dates. And then I've done the same thing for the table name. Okay, so what you need to know is that this table is called table data, and I've just pulled a unique function out that uses the date in the name column. So with that in mind, back to our sheet, what we're going to do is I'm just going to create some boxes where we can select the name and the date of the test of our athlete. One thing I usually do when I'm creating sheets is I'll just highlight those cells yellow, and that just signifies to me that that is going to be somewhere where I can select data. An easy way to do this is because we've already used the unique function and we have a spilled array, we are going to be able to actually just reference that whole array, and then it will change as our data changes. So the way we do that is I'm going to click into the cell where I want the drop down to appear and go to data validation, as we've done so many times on this channel, and I'm going to select a list. And then for my source, I'll use this arrow here, and what the arrow does is just allows me to pick the data that I want. And because I'm looking at athlete name, I'm just going to pick the first cell where I've entered that unique function, and then just enter a hashtag function which tells Excel that I want to reference the entire spilled array, and then hit OK. And what you'll notice is I should be able to select from any of those two names. And I'll do the same thing now for the date. So data validation, a list, and my source, I'm just going to select the first cell where that unique function is, and then hashtag to reference the whole thing, and then hit OK. So that was just a quick way. Now we have our drop-down menus, and that was just a formality because we needed to get that out of the way so that we would actually have something to select. Now you see that this isn't actually formatted as a date. It just shows me the number value associated with the date. So I just have to select there, and I can go up to the formatting and I'll choose short date, and then we can go from there. Now, in order to make this chart that we're going to make, I need a few different types of cells created. So I'll show you what those look like now. I'm going to need one for the metrics, and I'll need one for the score that we want to pull out. I'm also going to need one for the scale of the chart, and I'm going to need one for the fill of the chart, and then the size of the actual marker that we are going to make. For my metrics, in my data, I just have 4 different monitoring questionnaire type questions, and we have mood, sleep, nutrition, and readiness, and all of those are on a scale of 1 to 5. So I'm going to copy those and come back to my sheet, and when I paste them, I'm going to right click, and because they were horizontal across, if I hit paste transpose, you can see that it takes those horizontal values and now makes them vertical. I'm going to put some cells around here, some lines around here to signify that this is in fact a data table, and maybe I'll just give this a little bit of a gray color and then go from there. Because we know that the mood, sleep, nutrition, and readiness are actually on a scale of 1 to 5, I'm going to use 5 as my actual scale value. And what I want to be able to do is when I select John from 1 to 2021, I need to pull out his actual values. So the function I'm going to use for this is a newer lookup function. It's called X lookup. So we'll type equals X lookup, open that up, and the value that we want to look for is actually John and the date. So we're going to use this X lookup to look for 2 things at once. So the first thing I'm going to select is C2, and I will lock that in with F4, and then I'm going to use the AND function to look for the date as well. Also lock that in with F4. So those are my 2 lookup values. Now when I hit comma, it's going to ask me where I actually want to look for that. And I know where those values are located. They're located in the table. If I start to type in TBL, and my table is called table data, I want to look for the athlete name in square brackets name, and I want to look for the date in TBL square brackets date. So what we've told Excel now is that we want to look for the name and the date in the table data name and date columns. And then when I hit the return array, now that we've gone through the table and we found what row these values are associated with, what is the actual column along the top that I want to return? So for example, if we were in this chart here and we were searching for sleep, but we wanted to return score, we would go down to, in this case, the second column and go across one to the score column and return that value there. We could easily just put in TBL data and then hit mood, and that is going to return the data out of the mood column. Or I could make this dynamic so that this formula actually becomes draggable. And the way that I could do that is I could wrap this in an indirect function and put quotations around it. So right now this is saying that I want to, what indirect does is it turns things into their actual string values or their word values. So what I can do here is I want to look at indirect table data, and instead of the mood, I'm going to add in and, so sorry, I'm going to add in and then the actual metric cell where that is, and then and so let's take a look at what this is saying. We want to look in indirect table data and, okay, so everything in quotations is going to be together, and then it's going to join this value in, which is mood in B6, and then quotation, square brackets, quotation. So really, this is just a roundabout way of accomplishing the same thing that I had when I just typed in table data mood, but we're just doing it dynamically so that when I drag it and it goes down, the next one it'll look at is sleep, nutrition, readiness, and we could do this for any metrics that we wanted here, as long as they match the headers from the actual table. So we'll do that. And then it's going to ask us what we want to do if it's not found. And all I want to do is return nothing. So we're going to use double quotations. It's going to ask us what we want to do for the match. We would like an exact match, so we'll use 0. It's going to ask us what we want to do for the search mode, and we want to search first to last. And then when I close this off and hit OK, you can see that that is actually going to give us our value. So John's mood on 1/2/21, John's mood on 1/2/21 was in fact 2. So we know that that works, and because I've used that indirect trick, as I drag this down, you can see that all of those values just fill in. 2, 3, 3, 5, we know that this works, 2, 3, 3, 5. And if we were to select a different athlete, you can see that the values change accordingly. So then in order to make our graph, there's just a little bit more information that we need. The way that we're going to have to make our graph is actually what's called a stacked bar graph. So we're going to have two series that stack one on top of each other. So for example, our first series might be this block of cells, and then our next series is going to sit on top and then sit on top again. So what we're going to create is actually one that goes sideways, but then has another one that sits on top of it, and then another one on top that sits as the marker. The way that we're going to do this is I need to actually create a size for my marker. And you can play around with this, but you can take my word for it that 0.15 just seems to look kind of the best. So I'm just going to enter that in there. So what that means is the actual marker on our graph is going to be 0.15 values wide. Okay, so you can see that our whole scale is 5, so it's going to be 0.15 of that. Okay, and then for our fill, we need to find out what the rest of the actual value will be, plus the 0.15 to actually equal our score. So the way that we do that is I'm going to type in equals score minus the size of our marker, and then divide the whole thing by 2. And you can see what we're going to get is 4.925, sorry, and I'm going to just drag that down. And all this is going to make a little bit more sense in a second. Now, when I go to create my graph, I'm going to select 4 different columns. So I'm going to hold down the control, and I'm going to select my metrics, my scale, my fill, and my size. And now I'm going to go to insert, and I will go to recommended charts, and I'm going to go to all charts and go to my bar graphs, and I'm going to select what's called a stacked bar graph and hit OK. So here is our actual chart. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so that we can see it. And here's what we have. This blue series here represents our actual scale. This orange series here represents our fill. And then this gray series here is what we're going to turn into our actual marker. This series here, which is our fill series, I'm going to put that on a secondary axis. And then I'm going to take this gray one and I'm going to put that on a secondary axis as well. Okay, so you can already start to see how this is going to work. So now what we have to do is actually figure out our scales. So I'm going to just take away the title for one sec. I'm going to go to my secondary axis scale, and then on my graph options on the side, I'm going to go to axis options, and I'm going to set the maximum value as 5.25 and hit enter. And then I'm going to set the minimum value to minus 0.25 and hit enter. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom scale, 5.25, and I'll set the bottom one to minus 0.25 and hit OK. So now it's just a matter of adjusting some of the colors. So the first thing I'm going to do is adjust the gap width, and I'm going to bring this down to about 50. And you can see I'll do the same thing on the other one. So there is our actual cells. Now what I want to do is actually hide this chart here, this orange series. So if I select that series and I can go to the paint bucket icon, and where it says fill, I'm going to select no fill. And where it says border, I'm going to select no line. So for all intensive purposes, that series has now disappeared. And then for our marker, which is this gray, which again is 0.15, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the paint bucket icon, and I will color this one in with a solid fill of black, but I'll give it about a 50% transparency. So you can see now it just sort of sits there. And I'm also going to give that no line. And then the last one that we have to do is this blue series here. I'll go to my paint bucket icon. It's going to have no line, but on my fill, I'm going to select a gradient fill. And now you can see that it kind of looks a lot more like the graph that we're going to create. So the gradient fill, what that looks like is we're going to get this menu down here, and it actually allows me to add in my own colors. So the way that I like to do this is I'm going to put at position 1, we're going to make that red, and we're going to give it a linear fill and then a preset gradient of the direction. We'll give it this one here, linear right, and then I'm going to have one at spot 45%, and that is going to be a yellow color. And then I'm going to add one more, and I'm going to give this also a yellow color, and I'm going to put this one at 55%. And it just makes that yellow middle section look a little bit cleaner when we do it this way. And then the far right one is going to be sort of a bright green color. So you can see we get this nice effect of red all the way to green. And my transparency is 0, brightness is 0, but you can see our positions. So again, the positions for the red at 0%, and then 45 and 55 for the yellow, and then the green is 100%. Now we can play around with the angles, and you can see what it does is it actually shifts the gradient. So if we put it to 180 degrees, you can see we've just inverted the red and the green. Depending on what type of graph you're making, you might want the red one to be further along. So there, now that's how we make our graph. And then now what we could do to pretty it up a little bit if we wanted, I'm going to actually leave those titles there for a sec. And I'm going to take the scales off. And all I'm doing is clicking on them and deleting. And I'll take the grid lines off and the other scale off. And for this readiness kind of part, I'm going to just make sure that that has no fill and no line, so that it just sits there. And now the last thing, we'll take these series off. And the last thing I want to do is I actually want to add some icons to this. So in my chart, I can go up to the top and go to insert and use an icon. And for readiness, maybe we want to use like a battery icon. So let's add a battery in there, hit enter, and we'll put that on our readiness. So maybe that's the amount of actual energy. Then we'll go to insert another icon. Maybe we'll do nutrition. Yeah, that apple looks good. Insert that. And we'll make this a little bit smaller. Insert that right there. And then sleep, we'll insert another icon. Maybe we'll use this alarm clock. Make that a little bit smaller. Stick it at the end here. And then for the last one, we'll go to mood. We'll insert one more icon. And maybe we'll go to happy. Something like this. Maybe this one here. And hit insert. And we'll make that a little bit smaller and stick that on our chart. And then the last thing that I can do is, now that I've put these icons on here, what you'll notice is when I move this chart, the icons don't actually come with it. So I'm just going to put that back. But what I can do is if I hold down the control key and then I select the icons and the chart, I can go to graphics format and hit group, and I can actually put all of these together so that when I select them, I select it all as one, or I can make it smaller altogether and bigger altogether, and it kind of maintains its format so that if I was putting this in a dashboard or moving it around, it would look a lot better. And just so you remember, all of this is completely dynamic. As I select different athletes with different scores, it will automatically update to reflect their scores. So I hope that this graph helps you out and is something that you would want to use in your future dashboard projects or some of your reports. And thanks for checking out the video. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment down below on what you liked about it. That really helps us out. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you.